Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar today. We're gonna cover the beginning of Unit 2 in Consumer Math. Today we will go over some of the topics that we use in everyday life that we may use and we may also use to make decisions. I want to start by introducing myself. My name is Miriam. I'm your math instructor here at Penn Foster. I have been a part of the team since 2015, and I have a Master's of Education in Urban Education. I've earned that last year, and also I am certified to teach high school math in the state of Pennsylvania. In this webinar, we will go over some challenging topics within this unit. We're going to break up that unit into 4 webinars, and this is the first one of the 4. Within the webinar and within the presentation, after each major topic, we will have a self-check question. These questions are not graded. It's provided for you to self-assess yourself and see if you have understood the topic, or maybe you have a question, or if you want to go back to the lesson and do more practice and read more on the topic. You are able to ask your questions by typing them in the questions box. Please keep your questions relevant to what we speak about today within today's webinar. Registrants, whether you attend or could not attend today, will receive a recording of the webinar a couple of hours after the conclusion of today's webinar. As I said, we're going to go over some basic math skills that we use every day. And today specifically, we were going to look at proportion and English unit conversion. And English unit conversion is the units that we use every day whenever we buy grocery or we have to go to fill up our car. These are the kinds of the units that we use here in the States. We call them English units. So let's start with the topic of proportion. What is proportion? The easiest example that I thought to bring to this webinar to explain what is a proportion is baking, because most of us have either baked a cake following the instructions on the box or watched somebody else baking a cake. So I thought to bring that one example from our life just to explain what is a proportion, what is the meaning of a proportion. And I try to define proportion in simple words. And I just describe it as 2 variables with values that always follow the same relation. When we go over that example on the bottom, you will understand what I mean by variables and what I mean by relation. So let's read the example and try to understand what is a proportion. If baking a cake calls for 3 cups of flour and 1.5 cups of sugar, then if you want to use 6 cups of flour, how many cups of sugar you should use to keep the same texture, the same flavor, the same everything on your cake? And if you think about it, just common sense, you will say, oh, 3 cups of sugar, because you know what? When we use 3 cups of flour, we use only 1.5 cups of sugar. So if we double the amount of flour to make it 6 cups, then we have to double the amount of sugar as well. 1.5, 1.5 cups times 2, double that, is 3 cups of sugar. So in both cases, whether you're using the 3 cups of flour or 6 cups of flour, the flour is always double the amount of sugar. This is the relation. So the flour, no matter how big the cake is that you're planning to bake, the amount of flour should be double the amount of sugar. Or if you want to look at it another way, the amount of sugar is always half the amount of flour. So the proportion here is that if you're using 6 cups of flour, you have to keep the 3 cups of flour of sugar. If you have 3 cups of flour, then 1.5 cups of sugar. And as I said, the half or the double relation between the ingredients, the variables, is the relation. What makes that relation a proportion. No matter how much you increase the flour or the sugar, they have the same relation, the double or the half. So to bake a good cake, you need to keep the proportion. So this is what we mean by proportion. In this example that we went over about the cake, it's really easy. It's fairly easy to, to predict how many cups of flour I'm going to use, if I'm going to use 3 cups of sugar, or how many cups of sugar I want to use if I want to use 9 cups of flour, for example, because it's easy. Just multiply times 2 or 3, and that will get you the right number of cups. But sometimes we have not so straight numbers, and we need to understand and learn how to solve a proportion, like in this example. If 2 pounds of orange are on sale for $2.80, how much is it costs to buy 5 pounds of orange? So now, because we have a decimal number here, 280, it's going to be hard for us to just multiply times a number or whole number. So in that case, we need to set up a proportion and learn how to solve the proportion. So a proportion, just to start with, a proportion is 2 equal fractions. 2 equal fractions. So I'm going to start setting up my proportion to solve for how many dollars, or what is the cost for 5 pounds of orange if I know that 2 pounds will cost $2.80. So I'm going to set up my proportion as follows. A fraction equals to a fraction. That is the proportion. Now I have 2 pounds of orange. They cost $2.80, and that is the dollar unit. Then what would be the cost for 5 pounds of orange? And that would be the cost that we do not know. We're trying to figure out the cost in dollar. Now, when I set up the proportion, I need to be careful. I need to keep the order. If the first fraction has the pounds over dollars, then the second fraction has the pounds over dollars. The first fraction speaks about the factual information, the fact that we know. The fact is 2 pounds cost $2.80. That would be on one fraction. The second fraction would be the known. The known is 5 pounds. Then the unknown would be how many dollars we need to pay for the 5 pounds. But the order on how you set up your proportion will determine if your answer would be correct or no. So again, order is so important. Now, I did set up the proportion. How do I solve the proportion? When I say solve the proportion, meaning find the unknown value. What is the cost of 5 pounds of orange? I do it my way. You can figure out another way, but I like the one-step way I'm going to show you right now. And I have it there listed. 1, cross multiply the 2 known values. So the 2 known values, so the proportion altogether have 4 values. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have to have 3 known. 1, 2, 3, and only 1 unknown. Cross multiply the 2 known values. Cross multiply the 2 known values. And then divide over the remaining known value. So divide the product over the 2 pounds. So divide. Okay, so let's do that and write this out and see how to find the cost for 5 pounds of orange. Equals to multiply, divide. I'm going to have a fraction. 5 times 5 times 2.80, and then divide over 2, and then divide over 2. Okay, if you're using a calculator, you want to do it as follows. You're gonna punch in 5 times 2.8, and then equals or enter, and then divide over 2 equals or enter, and that will give you the cost in dollars. It will cost you $7 to buy 5 pounds of orange if 2 pounds cost that much. If you have any questions, again, I just want to remind you that you're able to type in your questions in the questions box. Okay, so this is how we set up the proportion. This is how we determine the factual information. The 2 pounds are for $2.80. The known value is 5. The unknown value is the cost of the 5 pounds. And this is how we solve the proportion. Okay, let's look at another example. You are running a daycare where the ratio of teacher to pre-K students in your state is 2 to 11. So 2 teachers to 11 students. How many teachers need to be present if a certain time 20 preschoolers are attending the daycare? It's a proportion. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to set up my proportion correctly. A fraction equals to a fraction. I need to determine what goes on the top and what goes on the bottom. I can go with teacher, teacher, student, students, or student, students, teacher, teacher. The order, though, have to be the same on both fractions. So let's do teacher. That's teacher. And here the corresponding number of students. So the factual information, I know that the rule says 2 teachers for every 11 students. So I have 2 over 11. I have to keep the same order. Teacher on the top, number of the teachers on the top, and students on the bottom on the second fractions. Well, I know how many students will be there on that day. I know 20. So this is a known value. The unknown value is the number of the teachers the manager of the daycare need to make sure to be present on that day. So I have my proportion set up correctly. Now I need to solve the proportion. So we're going to do the number of teachers equals 2. The same thing I did in the previous example, multiply and then divide. Cross multiply the 2 known values and then divide over the remaining value. We're going to do that in one step. 3 times 20 and then divide over 11. That will give you the answer. And the answer would be 3.64. And since we're talking about teachers, not pounds, for example, then the minimum number of teachers that have to be present on that day would be 4. 4 teachers needed that day, because you cannot break down a teacher to a 3.64 teachers. That's what I mean. So the common sense says, well, then the daycare needs 4 teachers to be present at a time on that day. Any question? Okay, let's move on to a self-check question. And these are the questions I referred to in the beginning. These are not graded. These are offered to you here in the webinar just for you to try and do the proportion yourself and see if you got it right or no. I do not keep track of who did the question correctly or no. This is just merely for you and me. It benefits me too to see if I was able to explain that topic in a clear way or no. So I'm going to change my screen after I'm going to read the question together, and then you'll have a chance to select the right answer that you think is correct. So the question says that you've decided to paint your kitchen and dining room with green tea green. It's a color. To get the desired color, you need to mix 3 gallons of wasabi green with 2 gallons of pineapple yellow. How many gallons of pineapple yellow you need to mix with 5 gallons of wasabi green? So now it's a proportion. It's obvious. You need to set up the proportion. I'm not going to change my screen yet. I'm going to give you a chance to look at the factual information. How many gallons of wasabi green and pineapple yellow have to be mixed in, and then how many gallons of pineapple yellow to be mixed in with 5 gallons of wasabi green to get to your desired green tea green. So set up the proportion, decide which color is going to go on the top and which color is going to go on the bottom of the fraction. And you need 2 fractions. put the factual information on one fraction, usually the left one, and then the other fraction will have the one known value, the 5 gallons of Wasabi Green, and the one unknown value, which is the gallons of pineapple yellow. Okay, I'm just going slowly through that because I really want you to do that question and see what you got at the end. Okay, let me change then my screen and give you the shortened version of the question, but the same answers provided, and see which one you think is the right amount of yellow, pineapple yellow. Here you go. I'm just going to wait for another about 10 seconds and then I'll do the problem with you. So at least you have a reference on how to do that kind of problem. But I would like you to try and select an answer, please. Okay, let's do the question together. So again, it's a proportion. We need to set up the proportion correctly. We have two fractions, 1 and 2. I'm going to choose to put the wasabi green on the top and the pineapple yellow on the bottom. The same thing for the second fraction. Remember, I need to keep the order in pineapple yellow. Well, the reference information or the factual information tells me that for every 3 gallons of wasabi green, I need to have 2 gallons of pineapple yellow. If I want to use 5 gallons of wasabi green, then how many gallons I need from the pineapple yellow? Okay, and then I have 3 values known, 1 unknown, multiply and divide. Multiply and divide. So I can rewrite my problem as the number of gallons for pineapple yellow equals 2 5 times 2, 5 times 2 on the top over 3 equals 2, and then the answer will be 3.3333 or 3 1/3 of a gallon. So the answer is that you need 3 gallons and 1/3 of a gallon from the pineapple yellow to mix with the 5 gallons of wasabi green to arrive at the right shade of the color that you want, the green tea green. Any questions? Anything that wasn't clear or didn't make sense to you? Okay, let's go then ahead and look at units. Well, measurements we use every day. I mean, even if you think about the simplest situation, if you're buying a couch in your living room, you need to take measurements of your space and measurements of the couch. If the couch is, you know, the measurements, the tape that you have, or the measuring tape that you have has 2 kinds of measurements, like feet and inches, for example, and you measured 1 in inches and the couch in feet, for example, you want to convert. I mean, you can think of numerous situations that you can or have to use measurement conversion to, you know, decide on things. So today we're going to focus on the English units that we use in the States. There is another system that is used in most countries, which is the metric system. If you heard about the meters, centimeters, liters, kilograms, these are the units that is used commonly in other countries, like the UK, for example. But in the States, we are famous of our unique system, the English system. Sometimes you may hear it called the imperial system, that we use feet, gallons, pounds, inches, and so on. Now, the thing that is maybe a good thing or famous thing on the metric system and make it easy maybe to use is that the conversion factors are multiples of 10. You don't have to remember too many numbers. The multiples are always 10, either hundreds or 10,000 or 10,000 or a 10. For example, 1 meter is 100 centimeters, 1 centimeter is a 10 millimeters, and so on. Those conversion factors are always multiple of 10. Where in our system, the English system, you have to really memorize because 1 foot is 12 inches, but 1 yard is 3 feet, and there is no relation between 12 and 3. So that is maybe the only thing. But the good thing on the English system that we're able to make sense of it because we use it. We know how much, for example, a pound would weigh because we use that every day. But if I ask you to imagine in your head how much weight is a kilogram, that would be hard to imagine because we do not use kilograms in our systems or in our lives. So we need to learn how to change or convert an English unit to another English unit, like for example, a foot to inches or miles to yards. In this webinar, we're going to go over 2 methods. I'm going to teach you 2 methods that I find ways to convert English units. And then at the end, I'll let you know which one is my favorite. But it's your call. Whatever method that makes sense to you, that would be the method that you want to use. So the first method and the second method, by the way, both of them, you need to locate the conversion factor from the tables. And the conversion factor, what I mean by that is how many inches in 1 foot. So one foot equals to 12 inches. This statement is the conversion factor. The conversion factor that we're going to use in our calculations would be the 12 inches. There is 3 feet in 1 yard. So 3 is the conversion factor if we are converting from yards to feet or feet to yard. And we're going to go through plenty of examples today, so we're able to understand each method and also make sense of how to use the methods and apply the steps and everything like that. So method number 1, you need to find the conversion factor from the tables to decide whether to multiply or divide over the conversion factor. So let's see 2 examples. One is changing feet to inches. So how many inches in 100 feet? So if I'm just going to think about it just using common sense without using any math, any steps that I have to do when I solve problems on paper, I just want to think about it using my mind and my common sense. If every foot is equivalent to 12 inches, then how many inches in 100 feet? Then it makes sense to me to multiply 12 inches times 100 feet. And that will give me that 100 feet has 1,200 inches in them. Okay, so in this case, we multiplied. The other case is how many yards in 351 feet. So in this case, we are converting feet to yards, small to big. I'm going to think about it using common sense. I'm not going to use any actual methods now. I'm just going to have a self-talk with myself. So I have 351 feet. If I gather up every 3 feet, I can make up 1 yard. So in that case, it makes sense to divide 351 feet over 3, because 3 is a conversion factor, remember? And that will give me the number of yards. 117 yards exist in 351 feet. So that is the kind of thinking that we may go through when we try to convert the units. Now, you don't have to I mean, realistically, you're not gonna go ahead and have that whole discussion whenever you are solving a problem. We need some steps to follow and do the math and just have the answer. So the next step is going to go over the specifics of method 1. What should I do? Divide 1 and multiply 1. So method 1 says, find the conversion factor and then decide, are we converting from larger units to smaller units or from smaller units to larger units? It will make a difference because if you are changing from large, like yards, to smaller, like feet, you have to multiply. You have to multiply times what? Of course, times the conversion factor. If you are changing inches to miles, you have to divide. From small to large, you have to divide. These are the rules of method 1. And these 2 points here, or 2 paragraphs, explains exactly what I've just said. Why do we have to multiply when you change large to small units? And why do you have to divide when you change small to large units? Now, let's look at examples. How many inches in 350 feet? So 1, I need to decide. What is the conversion factor? I'm looking at the relationship between feet and inches. Feet and inches. So I know 1 foot equals to 12 inches. Now, in your study unit, you will see 2 kinds of tables. One will state that 1 foot equals to 12 inches, and one will state that 1 inch equals to 1 over 12 of a foot. I prefer to use this one conversion factor because it does not have any fractions like this one. This one is the same as that one. This one, though, has a whole number 1 and a whole number 12. I don't have to worry about working with fractions like the 1 over 12 here. So I always use these rules, not the reverse of them. So, for example, I mean, you can use them, but it's going to be a hassle working with fractions. If you have the table saying that 1 foot equals to 1/3 of a yard, it's correct. But is it easy to work with a third or a 3? It's a 3 because we're used to using whole numbers more than fractions. So that's why my conversion factor in this problem, I'm converting again inches. How many inches in 350 feet? Then I'm converting feet to inches. So 12 would be the conversion factor. Now I need to decide, am I going to divide over 12 or multiply times 12? I need then to answer that question, I need to realize, am I changing big units to small units or small to larger units? Well, since I'm changing feet to inches, and feet I know from our experience in daily life, we know that a foot is larger than an inch. So in that case, we are changing large to small. And when you change large to small, you need to multiply according to the rule that we had in the previous slide. So the number of inches in 350 feet equals to, we said we're going to multiply. Multiply what times what? The number of feet times 12, the conversion factor. Multiply using a calculator, I always say, because our goal in this lesson to understand how to convert units, I do not like to get distracted and do the multiplication using paper, using our manual way. Just use a calculator because really we want to know how many inches in 350 feet. We do not learn now how to multiply manually. So punch in 350 times 12. That will give you how many inches in 350 feet. So that is 4,200 inches. And this is how I determined what should I do? I multiplied. I determined that the conversion factor is 12, then multiply the amount of feet or the number of feet times 12, the conversion factor. That will give you the answer. Questions? Anything that was not clear? Okay, let's look at the other situation. How many yards in 3,900 inches? Okay, so I need to stop and think about the relationship, the conversion relation between inches and yards. Well, I can go with this one, but this is hard to deal with. I'm going to go with this one. So simple, only whole numbers. So my rule says 1 yard equals to 36 inches here, this rule. Okay, now am I converting from small to big or big to small? Let's read the question. How many yards in 3,900 inches? So I am converting small to big. So I'm gonna write everything I'm gonna think about until you get more practiced in doing the conversion without writing the rules and from which units are we changing small to big or big to small. Until then, I would prefer that we write everything on paper so we know what we are exactly doing in that problem. So we are changing small to large. And according to our rule, when you change from small to large, you divide, and divide, of course, over the conversion factor. So the number of yards in 3,900 inches equals to 3,900 divided by 36 equals to, the numbers of the yards would be 108.33 yards. That's it. Any question? Okay, let's go ahead and look at an example. Steve is working on a landscaping project where he needs to use accent brick stones along the perimeter of a garden bed, which measures, the garden bed measures 15 yards. So if I want to imagine, I'm going to just write myself a little diagram. This is the garden bed and this is the perimeter of that, and that's all together 15 yards. If Steve is lining one layer of bricks longwise, so it's going to be the brick like that, and the length of each stone is 1 foot. So the length here of one stone is 1 foot. How many bricks will Steve need to complete the project? Okay, so here I'm converting yards to feet. I have the perimeter in yards, but I want to know how many feet, because one stone is 1 foot. So whatever number of feet exists in 15 yards, that would be exactly the number of bricks I need. So let's write this down. So I'm in the rule I have in my head, 1 yard equals to 3 foot. So 3 is the conversion factor. I am converting large to small because I'm converting yards to feet. And the rule says multiply in this case, multiply. So the number of bricks equals to multiply. Multiply the number of yards times how many feet in 1 yard times 3 equals 2. 15 times 3, of course, will give you a 45 bricks needed for the project, or 45 feet. Let's look at the self-check question on that section. And the question reads, a major road is 10,350 yards long, will have a highway fence installed along the right side of the road. How many miles how many miles of fence needed to complete the project. So again, I need to think two things. One, I need to know my conversion factor, how many yards in 1 mile. Two, I need to decide, am I changing small to big units or big units to smaller units? So I'm going to go ahead and display the question so you're able to choose your answer. And here you go. Okay, thank you for taking the time to choose your answer. And again, at this point, my focus is not if you've chosen the right or wrong answer. The focus is to practice and to go back to the work and see if we have done something wrong or no and learn. Okay, so let's do the question together. So we are changing actually miles. We are changing, I'm sorry, yards to miles. So first of all, before I forget, I need to put my conversion rule. 1 mile equals to 1,760 yards. And I know I'm converting yards to miles, and that would be smaller units to large units. Do we divide or multiply in that case? In this case, we divide. So the number of miles of fence equals to, we are going to divide 10,350 over the conversion factor, which is 1760. And that will give you how many miles long the fence would be, 5.88 miles. So the answer is C. Any questions? Okay, let's move on to method number 2. Method number 2, basically we're doing the same thing. We're still converting English units to other English units. But this is a second method. If the first method is maybe confusing or has too many things to worry about, maybe the second method is the one that makes you feel good about converting the units without any confusion. So let's read the rules on the top on the blue box here. To convert a unit to another, you have to do two things. One, find the conversion factor that is the same as method 1. And then 2, set up a proportion. So method number 2, we're going to use proportion, the section that we have talked about in the beginning of the webinar, how to set up and solve a proportion. And now we're going to see how can we use proportion to solve a conversion problem. So now let's look at an example. How many yards in 140 feet? In this method, I don't have to worry about, am I changing from large to small or small to large? I don't have to think about that. All I need to do is to set up my proportion correctly. So knowing the conversion factor, which is the factual information I know, I'm going to put that on the first fraction. The second fraction will have my known information and the known information and the unknown information, and solve as before. So the conversion information or the factual information or the conversion factor is 1 yard is equivalent to 3 feet. That is feet, actually 3 feet, not 12. So 1 yard equals to 3 feet. And I want to know how many yards in 140 feet. And then the number of yards then would be the unknown. So let's put everything together on the proportion. Remember, a proportion is two equal fractions. The first one usually will have the factual information. 1 yard is equivalent to 3 feet. I know how many feet I have, 140, but I'm not sure how many yards in 140. So again, I'm going to use multiply and divide, cross multiply, and then divide, cross multiply, and then divide. So to solve the proportion, I'm going to do as follows. I'm going to do the number of yards equals to multiply. So it's going to be 1 times 140 over 3, which is really, if you think about it, is 140 over 3, because anything times 1 is itself. So 140 over 3, we divided. We divided because we are changing. If you want to think about method number 1 and relate that to method number 2, we're changing smaller units to larger units, and that's why we ended up dividing. So it's really, we're doing the same exact thing, but it's a different method. It's a different method of doing the same exact thing. So divide 140 over 3, and that will give you how many yards in 140 feet? For 6.67 yards. So again, in method number 2, I still have to find the conversion factor, but I don't have to care about changing. Am I changing from smaller to larger or larger to smaller? Sometimes, especially with the metric system, the kilograms and the centimeters, because we do not use that in real life, in our real life, we cannot imagine if a hectometer is bigger than a centimeter. And that would be where some students would find method number 1 in that case, when we use the metric system, is hard. But when you use a metric system, I would recommend definitely method 2, because I don't have to know which unit is bigger than which unit. I just have to set up my proportion correctly. As I said before, you're able to do yards, feet, or you can do feet, yard. And you're going to end up with the same answer. So let's try that just to give you, flexibility on how to set up your proportion. So the order is the same, feet and yard. So 1 yard still equal to 3 feet. I know that I have in hand 140, but I'm not sure how many yards. The same steps, multiply, divide. You will end up multiplying 140 times 1, and then divide over 3 will give you the same answer. So my favorite method, whether I'm using the metric system or the English, the one that we used to, is method 2. I like method 2 because I don't have to spend too much time thinking about which unit is bigger than which unit. Okay, let's look at an example. The total length of the lower edge of walls in a living room is 130 feet. How many yards of baseboard molding is needed to install baseboards in the living room? So again, I need to think about my units. Which conversion factor or conversion fact I'm going to go ahead and use? We have feet and yards. So I know that one yard is equivalent to 3 feet. I'm not gonna think about which one is bigger than which one. I'm just gonna go ahead and set up my proportion right away. I'm gonna choose to put yards, feet. I'm gonna keep the same order on the second fraction, yard, feet. The facts are that 1 yard is 3 feet. I know that the wall, the lower edge of the wall, measures 130 feet. So that is the known value. So the yards is the unknown. So I can simply now multiply and divide. So the number of yards of baseboards equals to 1 times 130 over 3. Do the calculation, and that will give you how many yards? 43.3 yards of baseboard needed to finish the project. Questions? Anything that was not clear? For those of you who just joined the webinar, you're able to ask your questions by typing in the questions box your questions, and please keep them relevant. Okay, let's look at question number 2. Alicia wants to decorate the edge of her tablecloth with a decorative satin ribbon, like some kind of a fancy ribbon. The perimeter of the tablecloth is 9.5 yards. How many inches of ribbon should Alicia buy to complete her project? Again, I'm not going to think. I'm not going to think about am I changing from small to big or big to small because I'm using method 2. Only I need to care about the conversion factor. I'm using here yards and inches. How many inches in 1 yard? 1 yard equals to 36 inches. Okay, this is all I need to know. And then right away, set up your proportion. A proportion again is 2 equal fractions. You need to keep order. I'm going to choose to put yards on the top and then inches on the bottom. And of course, you have to follow the same order on the second fraction. Yards and then inches on the bottom. Let's fill in the spaces. We have 1 yard equivalent to 36 inches. These are the factual information we know. We also know that the perimeter of the tablecloth is 9.5 yards. So that is the yards. So the only unknown I have in my proportion is the inches. How do we solve proportion? Cross multiply, then divide. Cross multiply and then divide. Multiply, divide. So the number of inches of ribbon needed would be multiply the top 9.5 times 36 divided by 1 equals to, which is literally means that you have only to multiply 9.5 times 36 and don't care about the 1 because anything over a 1 is itself. So just multiply 9.5 times 36 will give you 342 inches of ribbon needed for Alicia to finish her project. Any question? Okay, so far, before I go to the self-check question, so far we have seen 2 methods. One, we need to, of course, find the conversion factor, but we need to decide, are we changing from large to small units or small to large? Depending on which way we go, we need to decide on multiplying or dividing times or over the conversion factor. Method number 2, which is my favorite, I like it because I can use it with any system, metric or English, is the proportion. Find the conversion factor, set up your proportion correctly, solve the proportion, and that's it. Okay, let's go over then the self-check question. How many miles in 780 feet? So again, how many miles in 100,780 feet? So now I'm going to use method 2 because I like to use method 2. You can use method 1 if you'd like, but I'm going to use in this example method 2. Think about the conversion factors. How many feet in 1 mile? You don't have to memorize these values, by the way. If your exam is closed book, it will be part of your exam given to you. If your exam is an open book, you're able to look at the tables provided in your lesson. And from there, I'm going to leave you to think about the problem and select your answer. I'm just going to wait for a few seconds. And again, those questions are not graded. You're not assessed based on those questions at all. These are just provided for you just to apply what we've learned now and see if you want to go ahead and maybe study more on that topic, or maybe call, or maybe do some practice questions. So again, no pressure. I would like you to try the question, but there is no grades on those questions. Okay, let's do the question together then. And if you are in the middle of your work, you can look at your work and compare that with what we're going to do here on the screen. So again, I'm not going to care about which unit is bigger. I mean, even though miles are so much bigger than feet, but I'm not going to really think about it. I'm going to go ahead with the proportion. So first, I need the conversion fact, or the conversion factor, if you want to call it that way. There are how many feet in 1 mile? So their 1 mile is equivalent to 5,280 feet. Okay, proportion. Factual information goes usually on the left fraction. If you wanted to put it on the right, that's up to you. But I just like to go with the norms. 1 mile is equivalent to 5,280 feet. Remember the order mile, feet, then I have to keep the same order on the second fraction, mile, feet. I know that we have the feet, so that is the number. It's going to go on the bottom. 780, and then in this case the miles would be the unknown. Solve the proportion as usual. Multiply and then divide, cross multiply and then divide, meaning that the number of miles equals to 1 times 1,00780 over 5,280. Okay, again, if you're punching that on the calculator, even though you have to multiply times 1, but I would like you to know how to do that on the calculator. So you want to punch in 1 times 1,00780 equals, or enter, and then divide, and then 5,280, and then enter or equals, and that will give you the right answer, 19.1 miles. 19.1 miles is equivalent to that number of feet. So then the answer is D in this case. Any questions overall on proportions or how to convert English units? Any questions that you have in mind, or anything that I did not go over and you expected me to go over today in this webinar? Okay, then I just want to like to share my references. I did use that reference to bring up the mixture for the green tea green. So I did use that reference, and I would like to give you some tips on how to prepare on the exam. To prepare for the exam, of course, you want to read your lessons. There is no way that you're just going to go ahead and do the exam by watching the webinar, for example, only. You need to read your lessons. Do some of the discover more or the practice questions. You want maybe to rewatch that webinar. You want to reach out for help. You want to compare your answers for the practice exercises or the discover more questions within your lesson with the answer key provided. The answer key is there provided for you, and that's not cheating or anything. We intentionally having those answer keys there for you. So when you work up the problem, you had an answer, you're not sure if that answer is correct or no, then look at the right answer and compare. And that way you're able to assess yourself. If most of your answers are correct, probably you're ready for the exam. If most of them are incorrect, please do not proceed to the exam. How can you reach for help? You have multiple ways. Of course, you can call from 9 to 6 Eastern Time. You can schedule an appointment using this link, and that will give you the chance to choose the time that you want us to call you back and which day. You can send us a text message, or you can email or chat with your instructor or teacher assistant. To email or chat, if you have that kind of account here, you want to click on Help Center, follow just those steps, click here, click the search button, and then click on Contact Us, and then fill out the form that will send us an email with your message. Or if you have this kind of account, it's really the same thing, it just we move things around, but it has the same features. You want to click on help and support, click on the search button, the blue button here, click on Contact Us, and then fill out the form with your questions and the subject, and your message will be sent to our email system. At the end, thank you for your attention and attendance. There is a survey, 3 questions, very short, for me to have an idea how did I perform today in my webinar, or how I can improve myself next time. So if you have the time, even if you did not attend today, you're able to click on the link with the follow-up email and take the survey as well. Do you have any questions before I end the webinar? Okay, I will then conclude the webinar, and I wish good luck to all of you in the exam.